Skyrim is no stranger to noteworthy and engaging side quests, oftentimes beckoning the player to explore and even read journals and books in the environment to really piece together what happened on each adventure. In a way, it's the type of storytelling Bethesda are best at, because where they lack in traditional story and character writing, they make up for in crafting environments that tell a narrative all to their own, and let players unravel the mystery instead of it being served to them on a silver platter of dialogue and exposition. And it's this exact formula that has led their games to feel so unique and interesting, while also having so many superstar quests and missions. But for me, there's one specific standout quest that doesn't get as much recognition as a lot of others in the game that is the Bethesda formula at its best, and is such a legendary quest for me because it perfectly shows why these games are so special. Titled Frostflow Abyss, you can stumble upon this quest simply adventuring out into the wilderness in Skyrim. You spot an inviting looking cabin and home in the distance, but as you approach, you notice a strange scent of death, with a dead horse laying just outside the front door. But this is only the start of death and despair in this quest, because once you push open the door to this quaint and quiet family home, you are immediately met with a scene of blood smeared all over the ground and walls, along with a woman with a sword stuck right through her chest in the middle of the room. Upon closer inspection, you notice that this weapon that killed this poor lady is actually that of a Falmer, who are an ancient race of previous snow elves that reigned over Skyrim, but were said to have been cursed by the Dwemer of the time, turning them into blind and rabid monsters that live underground and kill anything on sight. What on earth would a weapon like this from a Falmer be doing in the middle of the mountain range immediately begins to flow to the top of your head. But nonetheless, the oddities only stack up more once you notice food and kitchenware strung all about, along with the skeleton of a massive dead Chaurus insect being near the fireplace. If you inspect the body of the dead woman too, you can find a journal written by the father of the home that goes into detail about how they purchased it as a family with 2 children and were so excited to finally have a place to themselves. But strange noises were being reported over and over from the cellar of the house, after which the husband left to get traps and catch what he thought were rats, only to return to find the woman dead in the center of the room with a Chaurus scattering around. Using his Redguard might, the man decimated the Chaurus and left his body by the fireplace, after which he wrote that he would be going into the cellar to save the rest of his family, making that your next goal too. If you decide to take your time and investigate all the rooms in the house as well, you can read more journals that reveal more about all of the scratching and weird sounds that were coming from the cellar, along with stories of the children missing the big port cities where they used to live, and general talks between the family about their new home and what they loved and also didn't love about their new lives. They were worried. Eventually you can discover a key in a burial urn above the fireplace, or if your lockpick skill is high enough, open the cellar door for yourself. And here you are propelled into a massive underground icy cave network with tons of Chaurus running around you must engage in battle with. Snow and ice have overtaken all of the family supplies and furniture here, and the culprit becomes crystal clear when you find a massive gaping hole in one of the walls, which leads to an even deeper underground cave network that, you guessed it, is home to the elusive Falmer and their pets. Through a series of notes you discover along with bodies of family members, you can piece together how they were kidnapped and tortured by the Falmer adversaries. But the most tragic of these is one of the daughters who was kept in a cage and starved while she cried for her father to save her, eventually taking her own life with a knife that her father was able to slip to her and alleviate her from her hell. And finally, at the end of the underground dungeon beneath the house, you find the body of the father himself, who with injuries and hypothermia crawled his way to the end of this cave, all in an effort to save his family, where he perished. And as a last sign of respect for the valiant efforts of this man, you take his remains to the top of the house, to the tippy top of the lighthouse, and burn them away into the night sky, gaining a permanent buff that increases your healing by 10% for the rest of the game. You see, the thing about this quest is it isn't the most in-depth, the longest, or even the most involved in Skyrim, not even by a long shot. But what it is the Bethesda formula at its best, stumbling upon an interesting location atop a mountain range you didn't expect to find, uncovering a harrowing story about a family and love where you least expect it, along with an army of monsters to fight, and a great payoff of loot at the end that makes it all worthwhile. Truly though, this level of environmental storytelling in such a tight and well-defined quest that takes less than an hour is what Bethesda games are all about, and this sits as the gold standard of why these games live on in our memories forever. Sometimes the most legendary quests don't need a cool twist or gimmick or a lot of talking and narrative, but rather just good old-fashioned engaging storytelling in a world and environments filled to the brim with wonder and excitement. I've always been a huge advocate for the fact that games are better now than they've ever been, and I often argue that people complaining about the industry too much simply are trying to relive the glory days of nostalgia they'll never get back and ignoring all of the amazing things out there. And maybe one of the best recent examples of this is Baldur's Gate 3, potentially the greatest RPG ever made that revolutionized an industry and moved an entire niche genre into the mainstream. And with any game like this, there are bound to be some amazing quests and missions to go on. And considering a runtime that can take well over 100 hours, this game isn't lacking on that front at all. For me though, there is one mission towards the end of the game that was the best of the best: the House of Hope. The mission revolves around by far the coolest villain in the game, Raphael, a mysterious figure who follows you and your party around the entire journey, even in Act 1. And it's in these early acts that you learn this scheming yet charismatic orator is actually a Cambion or devil-like figure. He offers you salvation from a tadpole stuck in your brain, turning you into a mind flayer if you offer him your soul, which any sane player rejects. However, the real showdown with Raphael doesn't even happen until entering his dwelling, the House of Hope, in Act 3, and boy, what a showdown it is. Your initial desire to find him revolves around the fact that he is in possession of what is called the Orphic Hammer, an ancient weapon you will need in order to break a potential ally out of his eternal chains to help you transition into the finale of the game. But in order to even get it in the first place, you need to get to Raphael, and to do that, you need to find a shop in the lower city of Baldur's Gate called the Devil's Fee. At the front of the counter of this strange and foreboding mansion is a woman named Helsik, who you must coerce into admitting is working for none other than the devil Raphael. You can do this by finding her diary upstairs using teleportation or flight magic to get to the roof from the outside, considering there's a magically sealed door inside, or you can report her activities to city officials who will cause all manner of trouble. On top of this, you can bribe or persuade her along the way, but no matter what you decide to do from a wide range of options, you eventually get to a point where Helsik will admit that the devil does reside nearby, but you will need to open a portal to the House of Hope by completing a demonic ritual upstairs. So you get access to a strange book which, if read, is full of rituals and poems of sorts that give you clues on what to do next, which winds up coaxing you into grabbing a handful of items including a skull, diamond, incense, coin, and infernal marble, which you can then place around a summoning circle on the top floor of the building. And once you solve this puzzle, the symbols on the floor expand into a hot fiery orange, after which a massive portal to the land of the devils is open. You step inside and are greeted by a foreboding and elegant home of gold and lavender plating everywhere, with dining rooms and tables completely stocked with food and other lavish pleasantries. And along with all of these, you also are met by Hope, the person the place is named after, who's being held captive by Raphael as his servant, but also as someone that will help you get out of here. So you get to walk around this big, new, and unique area, doing all different manner of things, talking to the locals and hearing their stories, or trying to steal ancient armor and weapons that will make you much stronger. Eventually though, you will get back to your main goal of getting that Orphic Hammer, which you can only unlock by finding a special phrase to recite locked in a safe in Raphael's chambers. So after figuring out how to be granted access to these chambers through a variety of methods, you are met by a body double of Raphael himself that tries to have sex with you. But whether or not you decide to succumb to these devilish deeds, you eventually get your phrase from the safe and head back to the hammer. And once you do steal the hammer, immediately the entire zone will become hostile. But luckily, the room to escape is actually really close by. The hard part of this quest comes from the fact that if you want to save Hope, the girl who was eternally trapped here and helped you from the beginning, you will need to fight your way back through the entire zone and into the basement with one of the hardest combat encounters in the whole game just to save her. And regardless of whether you decide to do that or not, you still have something even greater waiting for you at the end. Because when you return to the portal with the hammer in hand, you are met by Raphael and a team of devils ready to kill you at any cost. And it's at this moment that the best boss battle in the entire game kicks in. Raphael transforms fully into his devilish form at under 60% health, and a song full of loud orchestral strings pierces your speakers as Raphael begins to sing along in his usual mocking yet funny tone you have become accustomed to all game. And so you and your team must fight off hordes of devils along with Hope if you saved her before. And truly, this is just such an amazing fight and mission. There's even an evil character earlier in the game that can show up here if you killed him and can potentially join sides with you to take on Raphael based on the decision decisions you have made before this boss fight and during it. And on top of this, the fight really pushes you to use all of your skills and abilities, many of which will be on cooldown in need of a long rest if you've already did a ton of fighting to save hope before. So with your back against the wall, you have to strategize to the best of your abilities to take on a devil himself and take his prized possession from his home. It really is just a perfect example of what makes Baldur's Gate 3 such an amazing RPG. Characters from the beginning of the game finally having their big payoff, charismatic villains singing while hurling fireballs, and engaging in thought-provoking battles that really push you to use everything in your arsenal to win, along with truly meaningful choice and consequence where people you decided to help or save all the way back in Act 1 or 2 can show up here and either fight for or against you. And the craziest part is that there's just so many ways this could play out too. You could have sided with Raphael earlier in the game, you might not have even discovered the history of the Orphic Hammer and the fact that Raphael had it, you might have decided to leave Hope to die in this accursed land, or you might have ended up having sex with everything in sight and screwing up the mission because you're literally banging a body double of Raphael. Stories like this are what make Dungeons and Dragons as a game so bewildering in the first place, and Baldur's Gate 3 managed to capture that magic just right in the House of Hope. Death Stranding is one of the most divisive games out there, and for good reason. Walking around massive open environments and oftentimes doing little more than trying not to trip over that next big boulder while hauling massive cargo can be a mind-numbingly boring exercise for many. But the thing about Death Stranding is the beauty of this game comes from those moments of brevity in between all the tedium, where you just look out into a stunning world and take in all the sights and sounds. And there's one specific mission early on in the game that accentuates everything the title is trying to accomplish so perfectly, and shows why not every mission has to be about daring set pieces and massive explosions. And that mission is Order Number 14, Port Knot City. After having a brief stint with the invisible goo-like alien menace before, and trying your hand at a few high-profile deliveries across multiple kilometers, you finally get the first big mission to deliver some important cargo to a nearby port facility that ships goods across the newly developed waterways of America that formed after a catastrophe. The problem with this delivery though is that not only are you going to have to carry a fair amount, making your character slower and less silent on top of making traversal more difficult, but also you're going to have to make your way up a massive hill in order to get there, one littered with those pesky invisible demons. So you set out on this massive venture not quite knowing how it will go down, carefully walking across rivers and taking in the extravagant nature all around you. And it's only when you finally get to the hill that you encounter your first major enemies. Every step you make and even a tiny bit of sound causes them to become more alert. So you have to move as slowly and carefully as possible up this massive mountain, all while holding your breath and only taking small breaks in between massive rocks you can hide behind. It's a super thrilling sequence in general and heightens the tension to a major level, but the real best part of this mission and why it's so memorable is still yet to come. Because after finally making your way past these enemies and to the top of this hill, you are met with a massive sprawling view at the top of a mountain with steep cliff edges at every side leading all the way to Port Knot City adjacent to the coast. And just as you're starting to take this amazing view in, the best in the game up to this point, a song starts to blare through your speakers, one of pure beauty and resonance that seems to almost fill the void of the canyons below with its melody. And for the first time in the game, you really start to understand what makes it so special. Simply looking out into the distance and seeing such a barren and dead world come to life, along with that sense of cold from the environment and warmth from the song that unite into pure bliss. You see, the reason this mission is so legendary isn't the fun combat or cool action sequences, it's because of the beauty of it all. A song so powerful that you can't help but feel emotional, especially after such an arduous journey beforehand. So as you start to slowly make your way down this massive cliff face using ladders and ropes, it just feels unlike any other game out there you can play in such a unique and powerful way. I know people always talk about Kojima and why they love him, especially for the Metal Gear series, but for me, this mission right here in Death Stranding shows just how artistic and meaningful games can be, even when there's no combat or dialogue happening. And it's missions like this that lead people like me to fall in love with the medium so much and make videos about games in the first place. Missions that are so full of love and passion that it can practically be felt oozing from the screen. And that isn't even to mention the absolutely insane and unbelievable boss battle that happens at Port Knot City once you finally get there, that is a cherry on top of what is already a defining moment and mission in a game. A mission that takes you from humble and slow beginnings to nerve-wracking stealth sections to scenes full of emotion and grandeur, all culminating in one of the craziest things you've ever seen, and a boss that quite literally tears the world apart as you struggle for dear life. You know, a lot of people don't like Death Stranding that much and talk about how they just don't get it, but I would venture a guess that there's a very strong possibility that these people didn't get far enough to see this mission play out in full, because when you do, you realize that you're playing something really special that so few other studios are even trying to make.